Isn't it frustrating when your favorite houseplants become blemished by pests and diseases? Unfortunately, dealing with pests and diseases is an unavoidable part of growing plants either indoors or outdoors. I'm Joe Gadbois with Greenland Garden Center, and in this video we will be discussing some of the most common pests and diseases that affect your houseplants and the most effective ways of dealing with them. So the first step in pest management is prevention. If you can do everything you can to prevent pests and diseases from happening in the first place, you're well on your way to keeping those problems at bay. So my first recommendation is start with healthy plants. So when you're out plant shopping, make sure that you're inspecting plants thoroughly before you make that purchase. Look for any signs of pests and diseases, which we'll discuss later in the video. After you bring your new plants home, make sure to isolate them for at least 2 weeks from all of the other plants in your collection. This is so crucial because a lot of the time there will be eggs that can be present on those plants that you don't necessarily notice when you're making the purchase. And then if you just take those plants and add them in with the rest of your collection, before you know it, those eggs are hatching and your whole collection is infested. So very important to always isolate new purchases for at least 2 weeks and inspect them regularly before adding them in with the rest of your plants. So when you're watering your plants every week or every few days, just make sure to have a good once over of all of your plants. Take a good look underneath leaves, in little crotches between branches, that sort of thing, looking for any signs of insects and diseases starting to take hold, and that's just going to make it so much easier down the road. So the next thing is cultural practices for pest prevention. Plants are much better equipped to deal with pests and diseases when they're healthy. Try to maintain conditions that discourage pest development. So educate yourself on the various pests and make sure that the conditions in your growing environment are not conducive to their development. Simple things like keeping your plants clean of dead and dying leaf debris go a very long way because branches or leaves that are dead or dying can harbor pest problems. Keep your tools clean and disinfect between every plant. And then finally, repot plants regularly into fresh, sterile potting soil. Make sure that you're using the proper soil mix for the type of plant you have. Don't overpot. So don't use a pot that's too large for the size of the plant, and make sure that you're doing this at least every few years. So next I want to talk about pest identification and treatment before we get into the individual pests. I can't stress enough that properly identifying the pest you have is very important because this will inform how you deal with it. So make sure to do your research, and if necessary, visit a local garden center, talk to a horticulturist, entomologist, or some other professional in the field that can help to identify the pest you have if you're not sure, and recommend treatment for it. So with that said, we'll get into some of the common insect pests that you will encounter on your houseplants. The first one is the aphid. Aphids are probably the most common and recognizable plant pest. You see them on all kinds of plants, both indoors and out. And they don't all look the same. There's actually many different species of them. And the first signs that you'll often notice will be their shed white exoskeletons, which you'll find kind of all over the plant. You may also see some sticky honeydew excretions where the aphids have been feeding. They do tend to congregate in clumps. So in bad cases, you'll see them again on those new growth tips. You'll see clumps of them along the stem, on undersides of leaves, on flower buds, that sort of thing. The damage can include yellowing and dropping of foliage and flowers or flower buds, and sometimes even wilting in severe cases. Oftentimes, with small infestations, you can simply hand pick them or prune off affected parts of the plant. Insecticidal soap, which is a very mild pesticide, or even just a strong jet of plain water can knock them off and destroy them as they're very soft-bodied. If you do have severe cases of aphids, however, you may want to turn to some of the domestic pesticides that are available, and just about any of them will work. Again, read the pesticide labels. Some examples would be Safer's End-All or Dr. Doom House and Garden. They will be very effective on aphids. Just make sure that you're retreating every 5 to 7 days or according to the label directions to get any new generations that may hatch. Next are thrips. Now, thrips are a very common greenhouse pest, which can sometimes transfer into your home, as they are found on a lot of different greenhouse crops. They are small insects that are usually black, green, or yellowish and have sort of a tapered body. They're very skinny little guys, and they're also very mobile. Damage, again, can include yellowing and dropping off of foliage and flowers or flower buds, and sometimes wilting. Most of the time, you'll find them congregating on the undersides of leaves. Keep in mind that any pesticides available for domestic use will only work on contact with the insect, with the exception of Dr. Doom House and Garden, which does have a residual effect. Because of that residual effect, Dr. Doom House and Garden is my pesticide of choice for thrips. The next pest is spider mite. Now, this is a pest that can be devastating under certain conditions, namely warm and dry conditions. They're very, very tiny, usually orange or reddish in color, and are best viewed under a magnifying glass. Because they're related to spiders, they will produce sort of a silky webbing, which you will see in severe infestations. So what you will see is leaves that are just turning completely yellow and dropping off. You'll see sort of a yellowish or even sort of silvery haze that covers the foliage. And again, you'll see that silk forming, especially on the undersides of leaves and between branches in severe cases. So spraying your plants down frequently with water, just taking them to the bathtub and giving them a bath once a week, makes a huge difference. If your house is really dry during the winter, consider running a humidifier if you have had issues with spider mites in the past, as this will also make a huge difference. When it comes to pesticide use for spider mites, insecticidal soap will work for mild infestations. I do recommend using a miticide for severe cases, so something like Safer's End-All or Dr. Doom's Spider Mite Knockout will work. Next, we come to Mealybug, which is the most notorious pest of indoor plants. Mealybug manifests itself as a cottony mass of white fluff. And by the time you start to see this on the plant, you're often already at the stage where it's very difficult to control the insect. Mealybug can be absolutely devastating, and if it's not detected early, is almost impossible to get rid of. So another reason to make sure that you are inspecting your plants regularly. When you first see Mealybug appear, you can often just give the whole plant a light spray with insecticidal soap or something like Safer's End-All, and make sure that you are physically wiping off any of that cottony mass that you see. That cottony mass is protecting the insects from the pesticide that you're applying. So it's very important that you physically wipe all of that off the plant when you are spraying. What you don't see with mealybugs is the tiny little crawlers, which are the immature stage of the insect, and those are the guys that are actually traveling from plant to plant. That's why it's very important that even when you see just one little spot of cottony mealybug on a plant, that you're actually spraying the entire plant. Scale is a similar and closely related insect to mealybug, and there are different types of scale. The two main categories are hard shell and soft shelled scale. And both of them are pretty much immobile once they're mature and you actually notice them. But just like with mealybugs, they have crawlers that are almost impossible to see, and that's the stage of the insect that actually travels from plant to plant. Dealing with scale is much the same on houseplants as it is with mealybug. You want to make sure that you're spraying the whole plant down with insecticidal soap or something like Safer's End-All, and wiping all of the leaf surfaces that have visible scale on them. The last pest that we'll cover in today's video for insect pests is fungus gnats. And fungus gnats are more of a nuisance than anything else. They're tiny little black flies that often get mistaken for fruit flies, but in fact, fungus gnat larvae live in the soil, and the eggs are also laid in the soil. So fungus gnats actually feed primarily on fungi that grow in the soil, and they really like the same kind of damp conditions that fungi grow in. So the first step with fungus gnats as far as control and prevention goes is making sure that you're not overwatering your plants and that you are using fresh soil and repotting regularly. As far as actual pesticides that you can use on fungus gnats, the best one that's currently registered for domestic use is, believe it or not, mosquito bits. Mosquito bits are a biological insecticide, and they work just as well on fungus gnats as they do on mosquitoes. They're just a little pellet that you sprinkle on the surface of the soil and water it in. It is not a chemical pesticide, so it's safer to use than a lot of the chemical pesticides are, and very easy to use and very effective. So if you have fungus gnats, I would definitely recommend using the mosquito bits in any of your affected plant pots. So that pretty much does it for this video. I hope you found it informative. For more information on pest control, be sure to visit our website at greenlandgarden.com. Check out the helpful tips and what's bugging sections, where we have tons of information on horticulture, both for indoors and outdoors. Also, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and check out some of our other videos. Like us on Facebook and visit us on Instagram. I'm Joe Gadbois with Greenland Garden Center. Thanks for watching.